Good evening, guys. This is the scheduler session. We're really excited about the new scheduler. It kind of forms a basis of all our future work with Lightshow Pro. Eventually we will roll the sequencer in to use the new Playback engine and have a lot of new features, being able to use a lot of the features of the scheduler basis, and we can grow the scheduler to do many more new things like live control and all that kind of stuff. So first we'll begin by, I assume, I don't know how many of y'all have installed the new scheduler, but I've already installed it on this machine, of course. So basically I'm just going to run it straight off the bat. So there will be a separate folder right now. The scheduler does install separately from the regular sequencer. We have it in a separate build, and there are reasons behind that. It's basically so it doesn't interfere with some of the sequencer files. So, but you can have it installed on the same machine as the sequencer and all that stuff. So here's how you start it up. Get the little splash screen. So this is the main interface you'll come up to with the new scheduler. It's basically just a calendar interface, so it's pretty simple. We've gone away from the wizard that used to be in the scheduler. The scheduler will store your last window position, whether it's maximized, minimized, or whatever shape or size you have it in. It will save that. I don't think it'll come up with the last view you have it, but you go up here, you can select which view you want to use, if you want a month view, week view, or day view. The calendar over here will also allow you to select where you want to go, and as soon as you select a date, then this calendar will also change to match that. There are many different tabs here. There's the calendar tab. The playback tab is whenever you actually have an active show playing or an active default playlist. Right now, as you can see, it's trying to play my active default playlist. Let me go turn that off so it's not sitting there trying to play while I'm talking. And then we have the server, and of course it's giving me an error right now, but this is basically the status screen of all our server events. Sorry guys. All right. So basically, you can see it just changed my configuration. Basically, what it's telling me is it's trying to play that file, and that file can't be found. So a bad way to start this session, but I forgot to change that in my database. The server is basically a service that's running on the machine. This service is just connected. It's always running in the background. So whether you close this window, it's still running in the background. It's still ready to play your show. It has access to what we did as a database file that stores all your show's information, stores all your appointments, all your configurations, everything like that, stored in this database file on your computer. And the service accesses that periodically and keeps track of when it needs to start playing a show. So whether you have this window open or not, it'll still play a show, which kind of freaks some people out if you have this window closed and your default playlist or your show is playing in the background. It'll happen like that. So this service is kind of one of our future capabilities that we're looking at. I'll show you a little bit later on how we already have it implemented into a remoting capability, but how we expect to expand that in the future. So let me start off with just creating a regular show. So let me go to, we'll go to today, and I like working in the week view for some reason. But so this is our calendar. This is the current time. This is today. So I'm not going to create a show directly in there, but you can click in the window. You can either type in your show name here, or you can actually double-click it and open up your appointment window. Now this appointment window is very similar to Microsoft Outlook. You can give your show a title. So let's give it a title there. You can select the date you want it to play, or this is actually start time, end time. You can also do recurrence. You can set, I want to start at sunset, and I'll show you how to set your location here in a second, so it can calculate sunset times. Then you can set the ending time for when you want it to end. So we'll set it to end. That's the next day. So we want it to end at 11:30, say. Here's where you can select your intro and finale files. So if you want to add an intro, you can add, you can either add a music file or you can add a sequence there as your intro. We've got many files here, so I can add that. Now what this window is telling me here is I don't have my output set up correctly for this particular sequence. So it's telling me that I need to set up a D-Lite Zone 1, a DMX Pro Zone 5, and a DMX Pro Zone 3 for this particular sequence to behave properly. Sorry, I'm going to write these down since I don't have these set up. Then I'll click OK. And then if you can't see it, you can just hover over it and it'll show the name of the whole thing and how long it actually is. This is just an 8-second media sequence file that basically says Merry Christmas, thank you for stopping by, kind of thing. Then if you want to add to your playlist, here's where you can add to your playlist, and then you can select whatever file you want to add. And this one uses a different zone, as you can tell. So this one uses a D-Lite Zone 1. So this is this is actually an older file. So I'll actually delete this one because it's not the one I really want. So I'll delete that one. Go back and add the real one I want to add. Now that's the same one. Let me add one. Now what it's doing here is it's opening the media sequence file to get all the data so it can, one, look up all the protocols I need here. So you can tell this is from my same show from the same year, so that's why it's want the same zone set up. And then it basically pulls up all that data. And if it's too long to fit on the screen, of course, you can just hover over it and it'll show you all the information that's there. Shuffle playback is basically it's the same as what it used to be. If you have all your playlists filled up and you wanted to shuffle all of your playlists during playback, then you can select that. It'll shuffle every time it goes through the entire playlist. It'll shuffle and then start them all over again in a different order. Loop entire playlist. Here you can tell it you only want your show to loop so many times. Most of the time people choose loop continuously. So that's what I'll do here. Pause between performances actually adds a pause between each item in your playlist. You'll automatically get a pause between your performances anyways, because we have to do a little pre-buffering before your playlist item actually starts. So you'll get about a 3-second pause in between your performances anyways, but if you want to increase that time, basically you just check this box and add more seconds in there. So this would create a regular show. Now say normally we don't create a one-day event, so we'll do a recurrence. So on the recurrence, I want all my items to start at sunset, and then I want them to end at 11:30. And this one, since I call this my weekday show, as you can tell above, I actually want to occur every weekday. And let's end on November 1st. So we're going to start on October 3rd and end on November 1st, and we're only going to go every weekday. So now I've created my recurrence. Let's say I want to categorize that. So I have a weekday category here that'll color it a blue color. So now I'd have my weekday show created. And you don't have to categorize it. It's just something if you want to see the difference between your shows quickly, you can do that. So let's save the show. So now, as you can see, it started on the 3rd. It's going to start playing in a second because I have it ready to. I have one occurring on today, of course, at this time. So what it's doing now in the background is actually optimizing my sequences. Used to in the old scheduler, you notice that every time you added a sequence, it would have to you'd have to optimize it before it actually added. Well, we allow you to add it, but then we optimize in the background. And it won't play back until it finishes optimization. So anyway, so now I've created my weekday show. So if I go to my month view, you can see I've got my weekday shows created for my shows, and everything's ready to go. Now, if you want to delete it, you can just click on it, hit delete, and you can delete the series, and it's gone. Now let's say we want to create a we wanted to create a weekend show. We could do the same thing. Let's create a let's add my Merry Christmas intro here. Let's add Toy Shop Madness to the list. Set it all back up again. Set up our recurrence. And let's say we want it to happen on Sunday and Saturday. And we want it to end by, it starts on October 3rd. Actually, we'll start on October 5th. It doesn't really matter. So it's just going to choose the weekends anyways. And then stop it on the 26th there. Save and close. And now you can see it created my weekend show. So it filled in all the weekend dates, and they're ready to go. So now let's go show. Remember, I had to set up those outputs. I had those outputs that weren't set up correctly for this show. So you go to your little orb over here, as Mike likes to call it. You can go over here and you can configure your outputs. So this is, I'm not sure how many of you have seen the videos, but we have videos that show how to configure the outputs, but I'll walk you through setting up my outputs. So right now I have already a DMX Pro Zone 1 set up, and I basically click on the expander button and it shows me that my DMX Pro Zone 1 has COM5 set up, has my baud rate and parity, data bit, stop bit. So this one's already set up that I set up before, and I'll get into the additional configuration later. But that's another section of this zone. So let me go ahead and add some more zones. So to get to more zones, you just click on the Add Protocol Zone. I needed to add a D-Light zone, D-Light Zone 1. So I've got a D-Light Zone 1. So now I've added a D-Light Zone 1. I need to add 2 more DMX Pro zones. So I have a DMX Pro zone, I need a zone 3, and I need a zone 5. So now I've got my zone set up that it said I was missing. So once I get those zones, then I will go in here and select the appropriate COM port for each of those zones. As you can see right now, I don't have enough COM ports available for all my zones. So in order to get these correct, you actually have to have your equipment plugged in. So I'm going to show you a neat feature right now that allows you to refresh your hardware once you plug your equipment in. As you can see, I don't have all my hardware plugged in. So I'm going to plug in one of my controllers. So you can see I have COM 1, 8, and 9 right now. So I just plugged in one of my controllers. Let me refresh my hardware. Now what it's going to do is it's going to ask me, hey, you haven't saved the current configuration. And what it's going to do is it's going to reload my current configuration from the database. And it's asking me, do I want to save this, what I have, all these zones I just programmed in, as my current configuration before I wipe them all out and refresh it from the database. So I don't want to go through adding zones again, so I'm going to say yes. So as you can see, it reloaded all my zones that I just put in. And now I have 4 COM ports. So I added a COM 5, I believe, to my list. So now I just added my controller. So now I'm going to set that one as COM 5. This one set as COM 8 for D-Light. I'll set this one as COM 9. And that one's still COM 1. So I have my 4 zones set up for my show. You can delete zones. Just click on the zone you want to delete, and you can click on here and click on delete. It will give you a warning before it deletes it. And then if you want to back up your configuration, you can back up your configuration. So what it's going to do is it's going to save it as an IO backup file. So now if I happen to delete one of these, I want to restore, and it puts it all back. So everything's back the way it was, set it to COM 5. So that way you can delete, and if you save it off and for some reason your database gets deleted or something like that, then you can always restore it from a backup copy. So after you get all this set up, especially the 131 users, and I'll show you how the 131 setup goes here in a second. But if you have a lot of universes in the 131, then you definitely want to back that up so you don't have to re-enter it every time. So now that I've got that saved, now as you can see, my weekend show starts on a weekend, so I don't have any way to test it out right now. Well, actually you do. We have added a manual playback capability for shows. So if you click on manual playback, and then now my weekend show pops up in the list because it's part of my show. So I can select that, and then if I hit play, it'll load up my weekend show and start to play it. So it looks like it's still optimizing it. This should be working. Sorry, guys. I think I'm caught in a state where I had a problem with my default playlist. So let me restart the server. It's a good time to show you how to restart the server if something happens. Sorry about that. Wasn't expecting that to happen. So if you go to your service manager here, and you can see I have the Light Show Pro service. It's actually in a starting state, so it's something going on with it right now. I think it's probably due to some programming I was doing earlier, so let me restart my service here. Alright, so now that it is saved and started. So now let me go back here. So now I've cleared it out of the state it was in. And you can go over here, you can see that it reloaded. So basically it tells me the version, tells me it started, the streaming server started. These buffers server and streaming server are what we use to communicate with the server. Tells me my license and all that kind of information. This computer information is to help us. If you ever have a problem, we can tell what your CPU you're running on and that kind of stuff. So that helps us sometimes determine what issues you may be having. And then it tells me all the plugins that were loaded and hardware that were loaded. So now let's go back. Let's do manual playback now. So now you can see it loaded my weekend show. It's ready to play. So as soon as I hit play, it's going to play my intro first, which is my Merry Christmas, which I can hear it in my ears right now. And then it'll proceed to play my show. So it'll start my first show there. To stop playback of it, then we can just hit stop. And if you go over to the server tab, you can see where it was, where it actually started playing it. So it started playback of my weekend show. It told me that it was playing this show. Then I didn't have these two zones are kind of faked out COM ports, so that's why these failed. So basically, this will tell you whenever you have a problem with one of your serial ports on your computer. So basically, these two zones are actually COM ports that are kind of development COM ports on my computer, so that's why I can't send out to those COM ports. So it gives me an error, but it'll keep playing back. So my controller that I do have plugged in right now actually started lighting up whenever I play back my show. So any controllers that are still hooked up, it'll keep trying to play them, and it won't just error out and stop your show. So that is something new that we've added this year to try to keep your show playing, no matter if a controller fails or something like that. So anyways, that walks you through kind of setting up a show, setting up some of the outputs. I see a whole bunch of questions being asked, and Jeff is dutifully answering as well as possible. Now, another thing you can do is once you have all your appointments set up, you can back up those shows. So now that my shows are backed up, now if I happen to lose them or anything like that, then I can easily restore them back just by going in here and selecting my backup file. And restore them back to where they were. Okay, now let's get into some more features of the new scheduler. Let me show you how to do while we're in the configure outputs a while ago, I can show you how to do an E131 zone, and I'll show you the advanced expander on this also. So if we go into here, we add a 131 zone. And this would be the same for ArtNet also. ArtNet uses the same Ethernet communications. So here's your familiar table for a Ethernet zone with multiple universes. So what we've done is we've added a defaults capability so you can load the mini zones quickly if they're all in contiguous order. So what I'm going to do first, though, is I'm going to go ahead and set up a default universe. We do this one. Sorry, it's not letting me do it. Stand by. There we go. So let me set up the first one how I want it. So I want to set it up for that. Let's say I want to set up a multicast interface, so I might use a local area connection. Now once I have my default set up here, now I can load the defaults for how many ever universes I want, and it will copy at least the multicast interface down the whole list. So I can add a quick 10 extra connections very quickly, and it'll copy the multicast interface, so I don't have to drop down that box every time. And then of course it sets up the universes in a contiguous order so that the count is increased by 512 each time. So that's what the load defaults does for you. It allows you to quickly add universes. Now once you've added your universes, let's say you're having a problem with your controller being able to accept you're seeing lagging channels, or you're seeing channels not responding or something like that. we've added in an additional configuration section. Now, these are defaulted for the particular controller zones, controllers that we have in LightShow Pro. So right now we have 3 different options for each controller, and we allow you to select all 3 different options. Now, for asynchronous only, that is mainly used for command-based controllers. That would be like your D-Light controllers, your animated lighting controllers, your LOR controllers. They're based on a command-based system where they're not a DMX protocol-based controller. We set those up as asynchronous only, so that way all the commands that are generated get sent out to the controller. So, because if you, in this asynchronous interval, if you change that for this controller, you could drop commands, because basically what we do is, like I said, the commands are, every command that's generated from LightShow Pro is sent out in an asynchronous only, as long as you have this at 0 milliseconds. If you increase that, and say you increase it to 30 milliseconds, then what's going to happen is the commands will not go out any faster than 30 milliseconds. And what the scheduler will do is it will drop out commands that get too old. So in a command-based protocol, you'll see, I've got one actually here, the D-Light. You'll see I have it set, it's set to asynchronous only, and it's going to send out every command that comes in because I've got it set to 0. Now for 131, a network interface is usually quite a bit more powerful and can keep up with asynchronous outputs very easily. So for DMX-based protocols, we actually generate commands on the fly. Well, we pre-generate commands during playback. So when we pre-generate those commands, we pre-generate them at a 30 millisecond interval. Now, asynchronous commands are commands that don't fall into that data generated. So it's basically commands that happen faster, or commands that are actually in your sequence. So like a transition could have quite a bit of asynchronous commands being generated, because a lot of times those are less than a 30 millisecond interval. So with an E131, you can actually set, if your controller can handle it, you can set the asynchronous interval to 0, and the scheduler will send out every command that it gets. Now what the periodic interval does is, whenever you don't have any commands being sent out because your sequence doesn't have any effects to send out, the periodic interval will actually send out the last command that was active. So let's say you had a on command, and then, or let's say a ramp down or an off or something, anything. It'll basically send out the last command that was generated, or the last command that was in your sequence at the periodic interval rate. So that way, some controllers I know will turn off channels if they're not receiving data at a periodic interval. So that's what that kind of is for. A periodic only, we do have a couple of controllers that are set up as periodic only, and those I think OpenDMX is set up as a periodic only output, and basically async commands are not sent out for that, so it'll basically send out whatever the last command that was generated for that channel, or in the sequence for that channel. It'll send it out at that periodic rate. So anyways, this is what you would deal with. And normally what you can do is you'll come on the forum and you'll say, hey, I'm having this issue with my controller, and we'll tell you, hey, can you try changing your asynchronous and periodic interval rates? And this is what we're talking about whenever we say that. So, but normally the defaults will work for you, so I wouldn't expect people to touch that section too much. So sorry, that is that's very confusing there, but that's what that is for. So anyway, so we've got that's how you set up a 131 zone. You can it's very easy to set up. Let me show you. If you do a unicast, then you can set up a unicast address just by typing that in. Now what you see over here, you saw a little red bar up here. If I don't have a valid it'll actually highlight the whole thing red, and it'll give me a warning saying, hey, you need to enter a valid unicast address before you continue on. Also, if I was setting one up from scratch and I didn't select either a multicast or a unicast, actually this one's copied, so it doesn't know what to do. Let's say I create size bigger than an actual universe, then it'll give me a warning saying, hey, you need to have your universe between 1 and 512. Anyways, that's the same as what it used to be. There's no difference there. The old scheduler checked that information too. So that's the configure settings option. Configure outputs option. The next item in the menu is configure settings. Now, what this does is this is basically the client is the user interface side of the scheduler. And this is what I was talking about earlier, where the service is the server side, the UI is the client side. So whenever we say server client, that's what we mean. So the client settings, the default sequence directory would be, whenever you select that, the sequence directory here, whenever you load a sequence into your playlist, it's going to first go to this directory. So you can change this directory to whatever you want it to be. There's a video explaining that if you need another video. The next line down is actually the playback server to attach to. Oh, okay, I see a recommended unicast or multicast. Sorry, I'm now reading the chat session while y'all are typing. Unicast, of course, would be better because multicast is kind of like broadcast. It's going to broadcast it to all your controllers. All your controllers have to process that message, and that could be very inefficient. So unicast is better. If you have a controller that supports unicast, I would set it up as unicast. So hopefully that answers that question. Anyways, this drop-down box for the playback server, basically what this is showing, this is the address, the IP address of my playback server. 127.0.0.1 is a local machine. That's just the standard for a local machine. A lot of you might see actually local host here. And say localhost instead of the 127.0.0.1. The reason mine says 127.0.0.1 is because I actually dropped down this box and chose 127.0.0.1. So what this drop down is showing you, basically the service that we have running in the background, if you have other computers on your network that are running the LightShow Pro service, they will actually broadcast their IP address and they will show up in this drop down list. What this means is that you can actually have the scheduler running on another machine on your network, and you can select it here, and it will fill in these port blanks. We allow you to change the port blanks in case you need to change those, but by selecting something from the, so you can put something in manually, but by actually selecting from the drop-down list, it will actually populate those port numbers for you from the server. So the server will tell you what port numbers to attach to. What that allows you to do is I could have my show machine running in a different room, and I could select that, and I could set up my show and play back my show from anywhere, from outside, as long as I had access to my network. Now, a more advanced way of doing it is you could do it remotely. So you could actually be outside of your network, as long as you set up your router properly, you can route your traffic to your scheduler machine and actually hook to it outside of your house and be able to control playback and all of the sort. So now we change that. So that's the configure settings. The configure default playlist is what you saw me playing around with earlier. This playlist is basically a playlist that plays whenever your show's not running. So it'll play continuously in the background while your shows aren't playing. And we limit it to MP3s. So I can select a whole bunch of MP3s. It'll fill up my default playlist, and basically it'll run in a continuous loop all day, all night. As long as your computer's running and up, it'll run this default playlist. And you just enable it by checking the box, and it'll start going. I'm not going to do it right now because it'll start playing in my ears and I can't concentrate. And it will show up on the Playback tab. Whenever your default playlist is playing, it will show up in the Playback tab here, and it'll say default playlist active, and it will actually show the list of songs that's being played. The About box is your standard About box. This is basically what version you're running. So if we ask you what version scheduler you're running, you can go straight to here and tell us what version you're running, what edition you're running, and then we have an acknowledgement section. So these are some of the tools we've used in creating the scheduler. So if you want to go visit these guys, feel free to. It's just kind of our legal responsibility to add these acknowledgments to our scheduler. To register your scheduler, you can, it's the same registration screen as you've seen before, and many of you probably already have your key. If not, then you should be getting one shortly or as soon as Dean can get around to you. But the same thing, put in your license key here, hit install. You can save your license key off if you want to, wherever you want to save it. You'll load it later if you happen to lose it or something like that. And that's it from that menu. So now you heard me talking about the under the configure settings, how we can we have a server address and server ports and that kind of stuff. I'm not going to show you the server configuration side. That's this little button down over here on the right. So basically it's configuring the settings on the server itself. So when you pop this up, basically these two field names up top really aren't, you can change them if you want, it doesn't really affect anything. Basically it's just a way to know which server you're running off of. So my computer name is actually Montgomery. It's the Let's Show Pro server. These two port numbers, you want them to be set to the same thing that you have your client set to. So that way they connect. If they're not the same, then you'll have issues connecting to your server. The video screen number is the video screen number is basically if you have video files in your sequencer and you want them to play back on a certain screen, you can set this number to the screen number that you want it to play on, and that way during your sequence playback or show playback it'll play on that screen. This the show address right here, you can plug in your full address, or you can plug in just your zip code, or you plug in just your town name or your state or whatever you want to plug in here. Basically what it does is it goes out to the internet, so you need to have an internet connection on your server, on your machine that you're running this from, so that it can go out and calculate a latitude and longitude. Now what it uses with this latitude and longitude is it calculates your sunset information, so that way it knows when sunset is for your address, zip code, state, whatever, and you can look that up. So if I wanted to put in, I'm close to Dallas, Texas, I put Dallas, Texas in and convert. It pulls up the zip code for Dallas, Texas. I can put back in my zip code and pull up the zip code. Now the Twitter pin, this is basically to Twitter your show status. So during playback, this it'll say starting show whatever on Twitter, and then it'll also every time your performance changes, it'll say I'm playing performance so and so. So that's what your Twitter is for. And when you get the pin, basically what that does is it starts up a browser window, and it basically wants you to authorize the app. And once you authorize that app, it will give you a PIN number. Once you get that PIN number, then you stick it back into this field. So once you stick it into that field and you hit OK, it will go out and authorize the Lightshow Pro to be able to Twitter on your behalf. Now, what we've also allowed is Twitter text. So if you don't want it to say a specific performance, that I'm going to play this performance or whatever, then you can put whatever you want in this field. Now we have shortcuts, so if you use bracket performance name close bracket, it'll actually insert the performance name that's inside whatever text you put in. So let's say Ryan's show is playing, and then I put bracket performance name. So you put that in there, and it would stick in the performance name. It will replace whatever default Twitter text we put for performance and put in Ryan's show is playing performance, or whatever performance is playing. The other field is you can do full performance info, which full performance info is the standard thing that we normally put out. So those are, but you can put whatever you want in there. Now let me explain a little bit on how the video's playback works. With the way we have implemented the scheduler and having the service can't actually start interactive videos with Windows. So you've probably seen or read about the Lightshow Pro Helper service, or Lightshow Pro Helper application. The Lightshow Pro Helper application starts up whenever you log into your Windows machine. And what that helper application does is it connects into the service. What the service does is then if it has an instance where it needs to play back a media file, whether it be a video, basically a media clip that you've inserted into your sequence, not the standard audio, not the audio that's in the waveform above your sequence. That's played by the service itself. But this would be like video files that you've inserted in the media clip section, even audio files that you put in that media clip section, any Windows commands that you do, anything like that would get played back by this Lightshow Pro Helper application. Now, and you can see the Lightshow Pro Helper application. I'm not sure if you can see this window or not, but the Lightshow Pro Helper application is running in the background. You can see it right there. Now, it's always sitting there running. It doesn't use any CPU. It hardly uses any memory. So it just sits there in the background, just running, waiting for the service to need to access it. Now, if you don't have anything like that in your program, you can take this out, and you can take out this process. You can go into the program files and rename it to something else so it doesn't start up automatically. Basically, all we do is we insert a key into your registry so that it runs this helper program at startup. But if you rename the program, it won't find it, so it won't start it. But it's up to you whether you want to stop it or not. It doesn't have any performance degradation on the machine or anything like that. It's not doing anything unless the service calls upon it to do something. So that's what the Lightshow Pro Helper application is for. It's basically to allow us to play videos and things like that. So now we've okayed that, so basically it's saved my configuration. So this is basically, this window is basically telling me everything that's happening on the service. What we're planning on adding in the future is a way so you could filter this out, so you can only see, obviously, if you don't want to see all the debug info and you only want to see the info or the errors or whatever, we'll have a way to filter those things so that you don't have all this text flying by on the screen. But basically, this is basically status of what's happening on the server and what it's doing as part of your show. So if you have a problem playing back, like if you notice your lights aren't playing back properly or something like that, you come in here and see if there was an error here that said, hey, I can't send anything out to that serial port or whatever. And so that'll tell you pretty quickly that you need to go check your configure outputs to make sure that you have the correct COM port set up for your show, or something else could be using that COM port. So you might have opened the sequencer and enabled outputs or something, and that COM port's still being used, and the scheduler can't have access to it, so it can't open it to send anything. So that would be kind of the instances where you kind of need to look at this. The other thing is the optimization. So if you set your show to start immediately or something like that, well, we have to optimize those files for playback. So what it could be doing is optimizing in the background, and basically you'll get it's optimizing the sequence, and then it'll say optimize complete whenever it's done. We've tried to speed up the optimization as much as possible, but there are limitations to how much you can speed it up. So we are looking at more ways of speeding it up in the future. So we will make it faster, but right now that's how long it takes. So this one took, to do my Toy Shop Madness, it took 14 seconds. Now my sequences are pretty small compared to some people's. Only about 1,000 channels, where some people have 10,000 channels or so. So theirs should probably take a little bit longer. But that's what it's doing. And of course, the more powerful machine you have, the faster this will go. So right now, as you can tell, I'm running on an i7 4-core machine. So my sequences optimize pretty quickly, and most other people's sequences compile pretty quickly. Now the full log file, I see Jeff's answering some questions about the log file. I will show you. Basically, if you go into your computer, hopefully y'all can all see this, you go into your C drive. Now, what we've done with the scheduler is it's using the program data directory for storing data and any of your database in log files. So if you go to C, and this is the program data, not your program files, it's the program data directory, and it's under the Minleon, like Show Pro, and under the server directory, and this is your database file right here, lsp.sdf. So if we ever tell you that you need to delete your database file, we probably shouldn't say that very often, but or if you want to back it up, you can copy this file somewhere else and save it off somewhere. This basically stores all your appointment information, stores all your I/O configuration information, it stores all your just all your show information, and that kind of thing is stored in this file. And your server configuration, all that kind of stuff is stored in this file. So you basically if you want to back that up, so that way you can back it up on a separate machine, whatever. That way you can always restore it back if you need to. And of course here is the logs directory. So this logs directory contains a log file, which this log file is the current log file for the day. So the log file for the day, this would be everything that happened. And you can see it got pretty big because it couldn't locate that media file. But this basically logs everything that's happened on the server for that day. And what we do is each day we start a new one. So it goes in the archive directory. So you can see here I have several archived backups here. And so each one of these contains an archive. I think we only store, if I remember correctly, the last 7 days. You can change that by changing the in-log configuration in the program files directory if you want to. But 7 days is really not that much, and we have tried to cut back on the amount of logging as much as possible so I don't store up a whole lot of waste a whole lot of memory. So you can see my files are pretty small. So it'll only store the last 7 days, and then it'll start deleting, dropping off the last one. So and the client files, this is basically where the server is storing your optimized sequences. So as you can see, these names mean nothing to anybody. So these are actually our optimized files that the server uses during playback. This number here actually links to a number in our database file. So that's how we look up the file name whenever it's time for playback. So don't rename these. Because if you rename it, it's not going to find it, and it's going to have to re-optimize it. So it will re-optimize it again and create a new file, but you'll have to wait for it to finish creating that new file before it'll play it. Plugins folder. This is basically where we keep our all the plugins for the scheduler. In the future, we plan on opening up an SDK so that you can create your own plugins. We have the framework built for it. We have to make some changes in the sequencer to finish that framework. So hopefully in the future a little bit we'll have the sequencer redone so that you can actually create your own plugin interfaces, your own hardware manager, your own effect types, all that kind of stuff. So this devices folder is actually, this DLL holds actually all the standard device plugins that you see in the configure output. So this holds the DLL device plugin, the LOR and D-Lite device plugins, the E131, the Renard, animated lighting, active home, all those reside in this DLL here. So in the future, what you can do is you can create your own plugin for a device and drop it into this folder, and we'll find it and be able to output on that device for you. Effects are the same way. Basically, we have 2 effects DLLs that hold all the effect types. Eventually, we will actually have an SDK so you can develop your own effect type. These 2 DLLs here store all the standard effects that are in LightShow Pro, and then we'll allow you to create your own effect types in the future. The hardware managers are the same thing. So right now we have 4 different hardware managers for the scheduler. We have an Ethernet hardware manager. We have a serial port hardware manager. We have a FTDI, which is the OpenDMX, what the OpenDMX uses. So we have that hardware manager, and we have an active home hardware manager. And what these hardware managers do is they allow the server to output all your commands. So basically, it'll initiate these hardware managers as necessary to output over serial port, Ethernet, whatever. They're very generic, so we can reuse them for any kind of plugin. So basically, you create your plugin. Whenever you create your device plugin, you would tie it to one of our hardware managers that we have defaulted, or you would create your own hardware manager and drop it into this folder. So that's those are some of the more advanced things that, as I was telling you about earlier, that we would add in the future to allow people to have more flexibility with their show, to be able to do more things that we don't have standardized in the Light Show Pro Scheduler. Let's see. On the Playback tab, let me go through a couple of the items here. They're all pretty self-explanatory. I've shown you the manual playback, so you can actually playback a show manually. We plan on adding a manual file playback also, so you can play back a file directly. That's in our future changes, and that would allow you to basically just take a file and drop it in and start going instead of actually having to create an appointment to play back. The rate and volume playbacks are exactly what they are. You can actually speed it up to 2.5x or slow it down. You can use this to help troubleshoot parts in your sequence. So if you created your sequence and you're playing it back and you see something odd or whatever, then you can slow it down to see what's happening or whatever. Or if you want to fast forward to get to a certain spot, you can speed it up and fast forward to that spot, and then you can slow it down and play it. And of course, the volume is just, we default to 100%, but if for some reason, I don't know, it's too loud or whatever, it's kind of like your regular media player. You can turn it down separate of your computer volume itself. So that's what those are for. This is to skip forward to the next show, next performance in your performance list. This is to go to the previous one. Of course, play, pause, and stop. So it's pretty easy to understand those. The next show here is when my next show is going to start. So we try to tell you when the next show is scheduled for. And then up here is if I actually had a show loaded, it would give me the start and end time for that show and the intro and finale that will be played for that show. Let's see. I think that is about it. I guess we can, Tom, do we want to open it up to questions or anything like that?
Certainly. Let me ask you a couple of questions right off the bat, something I think that may be concerns of a lot of people. Schedules that cross midnight, have you handled that?
Yes. So let's go ahead and create one, right? So let's say it's my midnight showing. So I want to start it at 5 p.m. and let's go to 2 a.m. That's 2 a.m. the next day. You notice how it changed the end time already for me, end time date. So it's already picking the correct date for me, and so I can just add a show here real quickly and save and close. And as you can see, it has my midnight showing, which starts at 5 o'clock, goes through and ends at, let's go the next day. Let's see. You can see it here. It crosses over from 5 to 2 a.m. Does that answer your question?
That's excellent. One other question on E131 that's always been curious to me. Could you have a simultaneous unicast and multicast on an output universe?
What it's going to do is that's what this use unicast box is for. So if you have them both set up like this one is set up right here, right now if I don't have this checkbox checked, it's going to use the multicast interface. So if I wanted to use the unicast interface, I have to check that box. So that way it'll use the unicast address. Otherwise it'll use a multicast. You cannot use both.
So I could not have two universe ones. One of them being multicast and one being unicast for two different type controllers.
In that case, what I would do is I would actually set up a separate zone for that particular controller. So that way you would actually set up another E131 zone. and then I would put that universe 1 in here, and so you can set up that.
Would I have to change my sequence to zone 2?
Yes, you would have to tell whatever controller this is that needs to use this unicast address. You just need to tell it, hey, I'm going to use 1 through 5, 12 channels on you, and you are in zone 2.
Last one from me is, do you have the minimum PC specs that the server could actually run on efficiently?
It really depends on your show, how intense your show is. We have specs that we recommend. We recommend probably a minimum of a dual core machine with probably 2 to 4 gigs of memory to be able to run pretty effectively. But that's for pretty much a low power show. You know, if you start getting into some of the higher end shows like 8,000, 6,000 channels or so. I'm just picking numbers here at random. It could all depend because you could have a bunch of channels, but you could have not a lot of effects. Like transitions create a ton of effects, right? So they're very intense, lots of commands that need to be sent out. You have lots of changes and that kind of stuff. Well, when you have lots of commands that need to be sent out, you need to have a more powerful machine to be able to handle throwing all those things out. The scheduler will be able to handle, it'll try its best to keep up. What we do in the scheduler service is in order to try to keep up, try to keep slower machines, allow slower machines to stay up with the music, is we will throw away commands. So if the computer can't keep up for some reason, we'll start throwing away commands, trying to get the machine, help the machine out to keep up with the music that's playing back. So you could start seeing breaks in the lights, or you'd see lights channels dropping out or something like that, or certain effects not happening just because we're dropping commands trying to stay up with the music. So there's kind of there's a balance there. You know, you have to, there's not a definite answer for you because it really depends on the sequence. I know Jeff and I have been playing with one-person sequence lately that they have many thousands of commands. They don't have a lot of channels, but they have thousands of commands, and they're trying to run it on a dual-core machine, which they're seeing it takes 48 minutes to optimize their sequence. So it takes a long time on their machine, whereas it takes like 10 minutes to optimize on mine. And then playback, my machine has no problem playing it back, where their machine is having a little bit of trouble playing it back. Now we've tried to add in some more capability in the servers to be a little bit smarter during the playback on slower machines to kind of help out more, to not starve out the, basically we have different threads that are running, and we don't want to starve out the thread that's trying to read the data out of the file while another thread's trying to output the data. So we've created hooks and handles in there so they try to balance themselves out, so we don't just we don't drop everything.
So basically it's going to be a hit or miss. If I had a machine that was a dual core running Windows 7 32-bit, it's really going to, with only 3 gigabytes of memory is used by that OS anyway, so it's really going to be a hit or miss as to whether that's going to be adequate to run my show server.
Right. I mean, something like some of my beginning shows a few years ago, I had 200 channels of D-Lite. That's going to be nothing, so a dual-core machine will be able to run that very easily. It all depends on what you have, an E131 with something like, I think Tom did, you have like 64 zones, 64 universes on an E131.
Yes, sir.
So if you have something like that, we're trying to send out, in that 64 universe, we're trying to send out 32,000 commands a second. So that's
in
a
other
lot of
words,
data.
I need a new motherboard then.
Well, I haven't heard you complain about not being able to send out that many, but
well, that's on my main development machine that it's running as. If I move over to the show machine, it's a less powered machine.
And this also comes back, and you can, in these advanced settings, if you were having that kind of problem, this you can, instead of setting the synchronous interval here to 0, you could up this to 30, and then update the periodic interval to about 50. That would also cut back on the amount of stuff we're trying to send out. So basically, it'll hold it and not try to send it out over the interface and not use up that processing horsepower trying to do that, and it'll just drop all those demands. So there's things you can do to try to help alleviate the problem if you are seeing issues like that. And we are trying to do stuff on the service side also to help alleviate slower machines and make them be able to handle more than they should be, you know. But there's a balance there. I mean, if you start running, you know, thousands of channels, and you're
Okay.
going to have to eventually get.
Why don't we now throw it open to the floor if anybody wants to unmute and ask a question?
Okay.
What? No questions from anybody?
Oh, you didn't unmute everybody.
Okay. Each individual person can unmute themselves. I'll unmute everybody.
Okay.
I hear lots of microphones rustling.
Yeah. See, I don't use Holman sequences. If you have a machine powerful enough, you know, you can handle sequences pretty easily. I don't know how many channels you're running now, but you should be able to handle this pretty easily.
Somebody asked, so I do no longer have to load my shows every night? That is correct.
That is correct. I didn't mention that the scheduler will actually wake up your machine if you put it to sleep. So if you just put it to sleep, the scheduler should wake up your machine on time and play back your show for you, so you don't even have to worry about your computer being awake.
Any further questions? Comments?
What's the difference?
Funny stories?
I have a question about the asynchronous settings.
Okay.
You had said that you would use that for like D-Light boards. What if the D-Light boards have been converted to DMX?
If you're using DMX, then you won't be using the D-Light plugin anymore. You'll be using a DMX Pro plugin. And I would just use whatever the default's set to here. If you start seeing issues where it can't keep up or something like that, I actually have a D-Light board that I've just converted to DMX, but I haven't played with it yet. But what we might have to do is adjust this asynchronous interval for the D-Light board to be able to handle. So we're not, basically what that asynchronous interval being set to 0 is basically we're throwing everything out on that serial port as fast as possible, as much as possible. So we could overwhelm the controller if we're sending out too much information. What it'll do is it'll just look like it's lagging behind because we're sending so much data to it and it has too much to process. So what you would do is you would up that asynchronous interval to something like 30 milliseconds or something like that, so it'd be able to handle the output properly.
Anybody else?
Hey, Ryan?
I'm here.
Hello?
Who is that?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear myself. This is Willer, Sam Schmank.
Hello, Zwiller.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Do you have a question?
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I absolutely love how much you guys have invested in terms of putting almost every option available to any holiday sequencer to the scheduler. I was just curious, can you give us a very simple idea of what occurred in terms of changes from version 2.5 to 2.8 in the sequencer?
That's for next week.
Yeah, we actually are discussing the sequencer next week. You'll have
Sweet.
which is
That's
the other
cool.
developer. Again, the other developer will actually be leading that
That's cool.
that effort.
Maybe same time, you know, Friday 9 Eastern or
Yeah,
something
I
like
think it's
that.
exactly the same time.
I will repost the announcement, as I alluded to before, that there was a possible follow-on depending on the interest, and it looks like the interest is high enough that we will be doing this again next Friday evening.
Awesome. Awesome.
Now let me show you something real quick. I didn't think about this.
Absolutely.
Real quick. So let me delete this.
I'm going to
series.
mute all the mics except Brian's.
Okay. Something that Jeff and I have been playing with lately. It allows you to use since the scheduler has a new playback engine that's a lot more efficient than the sequencers right now. You can actually create your sequences and play them back fairly quickly without having to use the sequencer's output. So what you would do is you could set up just basically a test show. And it doesn't matter what time you set it for or anything like that. And just then add a sequence that you want to that you're going to be editing. So now I'm going to save that. So now I'm going to go open up my my sequencer. Make sure I open up the right one here. Okay, so I've got my sequencer up, and let me open. I want to open that sequence that I just loaded into my schedule. So now I have my schedule open and my sequencer open. Now let's say I make a change. Let's go ahead and go to my playback tab. I'm going to load this up. I'm going to say I want to load up my test show. So now it has my test show all loaded up. And let's make a quick change. Just set something here. So I added an on command. Now normally you would have to, if you wanted to play it back to your lights through the sequencer, you'd hit the all on output or whatever. Well, what you can do also is you can just save your sequence. The server, whenever you're ready to try playing it back, you can just hit playback, and what it'll do is it'll optimize that sequence. So it'll do the same thing as if you were doing it in the sequencer, but it'll actually optimize it right there, and you can watch it optimize real fast. Sort of fast on my machine. It only takes about 14 seconds, and so then it'll start playing back that sequence, and you can test it out to make sure it's working properly. And of course it's playing back in my ears right now, so I'll turn it down. So that way you can quickly test your sequences with the new playback engine without having to use the output of the sequencer. And it's basically the same thing. And the sequencer would have to, if you had the output turned on, you'd have to optimize also. So it's the same optimization process, but every time you hit play, the server will go out and look at the file to see if it changed. And if it changed, it'll re-optimize it to playback. So sorry. If you want to unmute everybody again.
Okay. Each individual person that wants to ask the question can unmute themselves.
Okay, that'd be better. That way I
While
don't have to
ago, we got a lot of static.
Yep. Oh, Matt's saying he can't unmute himself.
Okay. I'll open it up the floor then.
Yeah, sorry if the organiser mutes us. We can't unmute ourselves until you guys do first.
Sorry about that. I'm learning how to fly this machine.
All good, all good.
What other questions do we have? Did everybody understand what I did there with the sequencer and the scheduler so you could play back your files through the new Playback engine? And,
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Absolutely looking forward to looking at or checking out the next installation next Friday.
Actually, on the sequencer, on the scheduler, we are going to try to put out, I think it was made as an announcement, we're going to try to put out scheduler and sequencer updates every Wednesday. We won't hit every Wednesday. It depends on if we need to make changes or not, right? So I mean, we're not going to bombard you with an update every week. But we do have some updates already for the scheduler that we will put out next Wednesday.
Awesome.
To help alleviate some problems that we've seen.
No, thank you so much for explaining. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no more questions this evening, I think we will bring this meeting to an end. We appreciate everyone attending this evening. We will post this video up for everyone to see it that missed it this go round. And again, I thank everybody for attending.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks very much, guys.
No problem.